that, but she's not here, and so Sally asked me to introduce her, so I get to do that. Most of you, I think, have looked around at all of the stuff she's made, and you see drawing, photo photography, painting, jewelry, and all that. So she works in a lot of different mediums, but she's not only artistic in that way. She's artistic in all the things she does. She's interested in science. She likes to hike. Let's see what else I was thinking of a little earlier. Some other things I remember you doing. But I guess the major thing that makes Sally who she is and what she does is that she's curious. So I put a little label called curiosity across her. So she's going to tell you about some of the things that she does and some of the things she's curious about and what happened after that. So Sally.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you all for coming.
Careful. I'm sure you up here, John.
A few of you might remember, this is my second member connection. I did one at least 6 years ago on my life as a biologist. And art didn't come up in that one at all. And Karen, who can't be here today, who I have done several artistic things with the village, she and I did a fall art sale a couple of years in a row before COVID. She got interested in all the other things that I was doing and asked me to do this one. And as I prepared for this talk, it was really the first time I looked back and tried to remember all the different art-related classes that I've done and all the different art projects that I have done in my adult life. There was even more than I imagined. So today I'll kind of share the highlights. But I also decided that maybe I needed to tell some people a little bit about my history. I still don't know whether to describe myself as a Renaissance woman or a dilettante, but I've decided it doesn't matter. As Paula said, I am just a curious person who loves learning and thinks, maybe hubristically, that I can do anything. Art has been in my life for as long as I can remember. One of my aunts was an artist who graduated from the Art Institute in Chicago, probably the 1920s. Her house was filled with her art and other art, New England antiques, and lots of plants. And I absolutely loved whenever I could go visit her. My mother was not an artist, except she was a pretty adventureful, creative person too. And she loved color. When I was 8 or 9, she remodeled her small kitchen, mostly by herself. And she installed blue fake tile wainscoting halfway up around the kitchen. She had a corner booth that was popular in the 50s, built in, and she painted the ceiling fire engine red and hand painted scallops around the edge. Her friends and neighbors thought she was nuts, but when it was done, everybody loved it.
In the 60s, it was very popular.
She made me beautiful clothes. And after retiring, she did rock hounding, learned how to polish and cut rocks, and took silversmithing. So she did a few things too. As a child, we took the train from my hometown of Waukegan to Chicago at least once a year. And one of the things we did on almost every visit was go to the Art Institute of Chicago, which is still, I think, one of the best art museums in the world. I also, and this is at my mother's instigation, took dance lessons for quite a few years, played the clarinet and the piano a little bit. The only art I really remember doing was in the third grade when my art teacher, my third grade teacher was an artist, and she spent every summer in the Southwest and was very interested in indigenous culture. We did many artistic projects that she was able to fit into the class, and I brought one thing that I still have, a painted rock. And in the back, I have a book that I made when I was going to Pacifica and learning about mythological studies. And what I learned was, when I look at this, it's a mandala. Which I had never heard of when I did it. But I'd like to think that's why I've saved it. And it's gone through every move. I learned to love art class at the Art Institute of Chicago with the Arthur Rubloff paperweight collection. And I purchased my very first paperweight in 1958 with money that I received for high school graduation. And I can pass this around. This is the paperweight that I bought. I didn't have enough money to buy any more paperweights for about 30 years after that. So that was my only paperweight for many years. I have other paperweights now. I brought one of the kind of paperweight that I really love. The design is called Milleflori. It's an Italian, originally Italian, and it's like tiny little plants and flowers. At the time, I dreamed of becoming a glass blower myself. That did not ever happen. I never took an art class in high school, but I did spend time learning about art and architecture in a comprehensive humanities class when I was at the University of Chicago. By traveling around the campus and the city, we found examples of almost every period of architecture from the 19th through the 20th century. And at the Art Institute, we could look in person at art from every period, and I loved that class. There were many years of my adulthood where I didn't do any art. I was much too busy working and raising my daughters, mostly by myself, and trying to save so I wouldn't be a bag lady in my old age. But I've always been curious and always willing to try new things and at least take calculated risks. And I think this aspect of me is important in my art. Over the past 50 years, so much of what has been good in my life has been a combination of fortuitous events, taking a risk, and the support of friends and family. I love the new bookshelf at the UCR library when I moved there in 1963. There were no late finds unless someone wanted the book that you checked out. And I went to the library probably every 2 weeks and left with an armload of as many books as I could carry. I read everything. Science, history, biography, fiction, art, politics. And it's where I learned to love science fiction, fantasy, and mystery, which I had never read as a high school or college student. In my years at Riverside, I took a biochemistry class, a class in Chinese history of the Ming Dynasty, and extension classes in French cooking and opera. I also did international folk dancing every week. And in 1974, when my daughters were 12 and 6, and I had just survived the death of my husband in a major job change, this is when I wrote my first poem, the first of my forays into the creative world of art. And I didn't have this here. I may leave it here for a while. This is a book where I've printed out some of the poems I have written over time. And this was written in 1974. There. A beginning. There is a rainbow inside of me, shimmering, sparkling, bursting with joy. If I let it out. If I let it out. When I let it out. When I am open. When I am free. When I am joy. When. If. There is a rainbow over me, surrounding me, engulfing me, part of me, joy. It's a poem that always brings tears to my eyes, not from sadness, but just from the
Joy.
wonderful feeling that I get from it. I also was already taking pictures at that time. I had a Minolta SRT 101 single lens reflex camera, which a brother-in-law had bought for me in Hong Kong, where he was stationed for part-time during the Vietnam War. I wasn't too serious, and I had never tried developing my own pictures, but it was something that I did later, a little bit of. By 1981, when I accepted the position of director of the Career Center at Caltech and moved to South Pasadena, my daughters were 19, studying mechanical engineering at UC Davis, and 12, entering the 8th grade. And I was able to do more things on my own. One of the first things I did was join the Caltech JPL hiking club and take the Sierra Club basic mountaineering class. I also joined Postmasters and began folk dancing again, which I had done for many years in Riverside. I loved my work and was having fun and was eagerly awaiting the time when both of my daughters would be on their own and I would have no responsibilities. Then I met Mike Shoemake, research engineer and optical physicist at JPL, on a backpack trip in the Sierras in 1985. And we married in 1987. He had 30 years before he developed Alzheimer's and died in January of this year. Now I have, before I talk about different particular pieces of art, I have a list that I made of many of the things that I have done since I moved to this area. Through PCC, I took a photography class, a poetry writing class, and a watercolor class. Through UCLA Extension, I took drawing on the right side of the brain. I did Toastmasters and the Sierra Club basic mountaineering class. I went to the Pacific Graduate School, Graduate Institute in 1997 and received a master's in mythological studies in the year 2000. Through Rhodes Scholar classes, I studied glass fusing, silversmithing, and Navajo culture. Classes at local bead shops were glass fusing, wire wrapping, and bead stringing. I did a community class with a professor at Glendale Community College on music appreciation. And I went to that class every Tuesday afternoon, I think, for about 5 years. And because of that class, Mike and I applied to Glendale Community College and did a study abroad class for a month in Prague, studying the history of the Czech Republic and the art and architecture of Prague. I began studying yoga in 1990, Pilates in 2009, and Tai Chi in 2010, and I still do all three. I did tap dancing at the Pasadena Senior Center. And in 2015, I began to learn meditation. And I started meditating seriously during COVID in 2021. I've been involved with the Pasadena Village since 2013. And other village members know many of the things I've done. One of which is ongoing is the Urban Walker Group, which I have coordinated since the beginning, and it was an offshoot of Peter Lasor's hiking group. I've taken advantage of everything that the village had to offer through their connections with the larger community. I did 3 separate programs in the UCLA health field, volunteering to meet with graduate students in the health professions, being a patient, interviewed by medical students, and meeting with students in the social work program who wanted to interview an older person. Just in the last year, I joined through the village the Blue Marble Fall Prevention Program, which I did for an entire year. A couple of years ago, a local group that I can't remember the name of, that does film kinds of things, got a grant to work with older people, and they advertised at the village for volunteers, and I was one of the first volunteers. And we worked with a young woman who is a producer, director, writer, and there were 7 of us. We each wrote a story, and then it was filmed and presented, and it is still on the village website, I believe. The one I did was called Leaps, talking about the leaps I've made in my life. Another thing that I did, also, it was through the California Village Coalition, something that their convention was online, and someone was talking about a program where you could have help writing your life story, working with a young person. And I immediately volunteered for that. And let me see. The result, I spent probably 4 months talking on the phone once a week to a young man from New Jersey. And he took notes, and then he transcribed them, and they were sent to this organization in the Bay Area, and the result is a book.
Wow.
I've realized there are multiple typo errors in it, because I'm totally not good at proofreading my own material. But it was fun to do. Okay, so on to some of the things I've done. I have a dozen or so poems here, and one or two are actually on the village website. One that's not, which, well, I was going to read, except that I made sure that everything else I had to look at was at big enough print. This one is not big enough print, so I gotta get glasses. I picked this poem because I think it's somewhat amusing, and it's a good example of how I like variety. It's called Sally's Shoes. One right, one left are all the feet I need, but shoes, I walk my life with various tread, and shoes I need to fit the beat. Nike feels mud soft about my foot, solid too, silver, black, and white. Spotted now with salt from morning jogs and seawater from the beach at Monterey. Dockstein hiking boots, size 41. Clementine's herring boxes were more attractive, but do I care? Covered now with onion skins of dust and memories. The last grunt to Whitney. Sierra summer hail. Beaches in the fall. And love at Iberville. Navy pump. Expensive, closed all round. Heel not too small, not too tall. The dress for success, glossy. Show those good old boys I can play their game. I'm good at what I do, shoe. Maroon ankle strap with pointy toe. So tall I can hardly walk. Heads turn as I sway up the stair, and my man comes all bulge to play. Ski boot, stiff, unyielding, tall, padded to warm the toes. We tacked as I careened down 2 steep slopes, bathed in flying snow. Minnetonka moccasin, supple deer skin, gently caresses foot. Toes don't have to squeeze inside. Space for nervous wiggles, space for freedom and creativity. My favorite shoe for today.
Nice, very nice.
Let's see. Yes, sorry. My nose is running. I took a lot of drawing classes, and I did it to prove to myself that I could learn how to draw. So here's some things, mostly things copied in pencil. This is the Van Gogh's Yellow Room. And I don't remember who this is. And then we had to do things. So this was drawing my own shoe. So I was sitting there like this. And a chair. And a stool. And another shoe. And then I was trying to learn how to do hands. So here's a hand.
Two.
holding on to a Tibetan Georgie. And people have said this doesn't look like me, but this is a self-portrait that I did at the end of, the drawing class. I did, in fact, do several things from photographs. And I did a drawing of my older daughter and my son-in-law that they still have hanging in their house, which makes me feel good. And then I got interested in watercolor, and I couldn't control watercolor enough to do a representational kind of watercolor picture. So I made up my own things. So that the three drawings over here are all watercolor. And these are not. I have no idea why I like this kind of sort of design thing, but when I sit down to draw and with watercolor, this is what comes out usually. This one is a little different.
Yeah.
I was being loud, I guess.
Color.
Yes. And I don't know whether to take any things down, but I definitely got into making jewelry. And I went to Ghost Ranch in New Mexico 2 different summers for a week-long class in silversmithing. And some of the things that I have left are up on the wall. The silver work. One of them I put glass that I infused in. And then amazingly, this bracelet is the very first thing I made. The instructor was incredible. I hate going to classes where they tell you what you have to do. You know, I've taken a jewelry class where you're supposed to make this particular kind of necklace, and I didn't do well in that kind of thing. So this instructor said, I want to teach you all the basic silver kinds of skills that you will need. And a good way to do that is to do something in overlay, which is a Hopi technique. And then he said, you can make anything you want to, just make a drawing of it and bring it to me, and I will tell you if I think you can do it. And so I decided I wanted my own design. He had books of a lot of Hopi designs, and actually Mike was there with me, and he made a beautiful big belt buckle about this big with a bear claw. And his cutting skills were way better than mine. He was an engineer, you know. I'm a quasi artist. But I did draw on a piece of paper the design, and used a little saw to cut out all the little spaces. And then there are actually 4 pieces of silver in that bracelet. One flat piece, the overlay piece, and 2 half rounds on the edges. And I didn't know until the bracelet was almost done that I was gonna put the half rounds on the edges. And that's kind of how I approach, or I just start doing something and it happens. The various kinds of necklaces I've made out of beads. They are all the results of beads I've purchased on travels. Or at bead shops that bead shops, I look for bead shops, or I did, wherever I went. And the very first necklace I made is out in the hall. And if the ladder's gone, we can look at it at the end. It was beads that I bought on the trip that Mike and I did to Tibet in 1987. And I bought some turquoise beads and some coral beads and some silver beads at various places in Tibet. And I brought them home and said I need to do something with them. And so I made a necklace. And that got me started in making all the other things. The glass I got into because I really had wanted to learn glass blowing. And I had some eye issues, starting with a detached retina in 1999. And I basically lost the vision in this eye, and I lost depth perception. So I am not saying I'm like Dale Chihuly, the glass artist, but a little bit. And that he has people who he gets ideas and he has people do his work, because he couldn't do it either, because if you don't have depth perception, it's very difficult to keep the glass in the right part of whatever flame you're using. And I did take a bead making class, and I made some beads, but I could not make a round bead. All of my beads were really interesting shapes. And that's when I discovered glass fusing. And so I started doing glass fusing, and I have a few pieces in that case there of pendants or necklaces that I've made. And then in the back are some other glass pieces.
Where did you learn glass fusing?
There was a place called the San Gabriel Bead Shop for a while, and I took one class there, and then I also went to Ghost Ranch in New Mexico, and took a glass fusing class there. And actually, it was a couple. The wife taught glass fusing and the husband taught silversmithing. And so I was so impressed with the silversmithing when I was there for glass fusing. I went back and persuaded Mike to come with me for the next year, and we went twice. And photography. I've always loved taking pictures. And I have I had in my kitchen a wall with 20 pictures, all these frames of pictures that I'd taken various places. And I have at the top of my stairs where I'm living now, a similar wall. And someone was over the other day and said, "What happened to all your photography?" I said, "Well, it's at the village for a while." I think the picture I'm most proud of is over this wall. I call it Rock and Wreck. It's a picture of a wrecked Ford, I think, like a 55, somewhere around there, Ford, and oh shoot. The rock in the Four Corners area, which is escaping me now. It's on Navajo land. And Mike and I were driving around off-road, and I saw this car, and then I saw the rock in the background and said I had to take a picture of that. Yes, yeah, that year, that year, Caltech they decided to have a little photography contest, and people could submit 2 pictures from their summer travels. And that one won the second prize. So I'm very pleased with that one. And I found that different people like different ones. You know, I kind of arbitrarily picked the ones to put here, and then I have a lot of photographs sitting in the back. So are there any questions?
Are you selling any of your work?
Yes, not, I mean, there are some things that are here that I wouldn't sell, but if anybody is interested in anything, just ask me.
Trying to count the number of different forms of art you do. I lost track.
Well, I lost track too. I lost track too. I just know it brings me joy, as they say. And, yes,
Glass fusion, when you put various pieces of glass and colors together in a kiln,
yes,
do you have a kiln then?
I do. Yeah.
In
let's
your
see.
garage?
In my garage, yeah. Glass fusing is, I think I like it, and I like watercolor too, because you only have a limited amount of control. And it's good for me to try things when you have a limited amount of control. You have to have the right kind of glass. In that you can't fuse just any glass, because if it doesn't have what they call the same coefficient of expansion, it won't fuse correctly, or it will crack. So most glass fusers use COE 90. There's another brand that's COE 96, and you choose either one or the other, because you can't mix the two. But they have glass that is, you know, pretty much any color you want. Then they have something called dichroic glass, which has a thin layer of metal in the glass, and that's what gives the sparkly color of some glass. And I have a big table with a cutting mat and a glass cutter, just the same kind of glass cutter you'd use to cut windows. And you cut pieces and then layer the pieces. You can usually, you don't want more than 3 layers. But you can fuse those 3 layers, and then you can add more glass and fuse again. And there are, glass fusing has gotten really popular in about the last 25 years. And so for people like me, for craft people, a lot of the professionals have come up, you know, with really good classes and training information, so that and the kilns, if you're willing to take the time, are programmable. And so you can have a general program if you want something called full fuse, which makes the glass perfectly smooth on top. But maybe depending on the glass you're using, you want it 5 more minutes or 5 less minutes at a particular temperature, or you might say, oh, I want it a little hotter or a little colder. So you have the kilns that they have now, you have a lot of control.
So you would just learn that through trial and error.
Mhm. Yeah, hang on, bring something from here. So this little plate that I made, the sparkly thing in the middle is some dichroic glass. And then all these little things are from what you call a pattern bar. And I have a mold that I can layer, like just glass rods or pieces of glass, and you fuse that. And then you can cut it up in little pieces and use it in something else.
And how do you get it into the plate?
This is a flat piece of glass, and and this was the top of it when I made it. And so I set this, and I set very carefully all these things around. And there is actually something you can use called glass tack, which you put a drop, and it will help prevent it from moving. Because you're working one place, and then you have to pick it up and go carry it over to the kiln. I can't tell you how many times my design got destroyed and I had to start all over again because a piece fell on the floor.
No,
So anyway, this hue was fused, and it was meant to be full fuse, but this bottom, because this piece was thicker, it's a little bumpy, and that's why I didn't. And then once it's fused, then you have to wait until it's all cool and everything. And then I have a mold. It's just a shallow dish, and you put it in that shallow thing, and then put it in at a different kind of temperature, a slumping temperature, and then it slumps down into the mold. So some things that you do require, so this was really one fusing to make these pieces and cutting it, one fuse to get it onto here, and then another fuse to make the plate.
So several steps.
So quite a few steps. And all of this takes a long time because a full fuse takes like 12 to 18 hours.
Oh, wow.
And then you have to make, and I did this, I'm telling you, because I did this once. I was so anxious. You really need to wait until it's done fusing, but you need to wait until it's down to close to room temperature. And I made something that turned out really beautifully. And I was so anxious, I took it out when it was too hot.
Shoot.
And later it cracked.
Aw.
So I learned never to do that, even if I was anxious. This one was actually part of class I took. And it was learning different kinds of glass will change color when it's fused or do interesting things. And so, depending on what you put with it, see, half of it is white and half of it's clear. If I pass it around to see it, I just kind of liked what it looked like at the end, so I put it in a frame. But the whole point of this was to learn about some particular kinds of glass.
That was an experiment.
And I think it was an all-day class. Bullseye is one of the major glass
Bullseye.
makers. And there is a Bullseye studio down next to the Judson studio in South Pasadena. And I took a class there to do this. And there were 8 different things that we were learning. And so I made 8 of these little.
Does Bullseye specialize in one of the coefficient glasses and not the other, I think?
Yes, yeah.
So is the color already in the glass or do you
Um,
put the color?
No, the color is in the glass. You buy glass of different colors, but then there are some kinds of glass that if you put it next to another kind of glass, it will do something different. And there are some kinds of glass that when they're fused, they totally change color.
Oh.
So you just,
And
you have-
you know? what
you have
stuff
to
you
learn, when you buy the glass, you know that, but then you have to be careful about keeping records of what you do and what happens.
So you know how to do it again next time.
Yes, exactly.
So you did 8 similar things and then used different techniques?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Each one came out differently.
Yeah, I brought, there's one other one over there. It's the same shape. The one on the right, yeah. Yeah.
Without the explanation, you wouldn't understand how complicated that is.
Yeah.
Really?
One of the things I had a lot of fun doing was all the one that's on a mirror, and there's like 9 small pieces of glass, each one's different. I had a lot of fun making those.
The top left.
Yes. Yeah. They were, in fact, I made probably 5 or 6. But every square was different. I hate to make the same thing twice. And my 2 daughters, each have one, and I have one left. Several people bought them at my first sale here. I think, Sue Kajawa bought one and gave it to her son for Christmas.
Oh.
Can I have a piece of yours?
You have a piece of mine, a little bowl.
Yes.
Yeah. This is really inspirational for me because I've had so much trouble ever since COVID of wanting or feeling the right kind of energy to do glass again. And I still love it.
How long have you been doing glass? How long have you been doing glass?
Ooh. More than 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, not quite as long as putting jewelry together, which I've been doing for 30 years almost. This is and maybe an example of my dilettantishness in that.
Have you done any standalone pieces at all?
What?
Have you done these standalone pieces?
No.
No, you have.
Thank you. I was gonna go get some more.
And that's a bigger color, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I managed to knock over my.
being, you know, big pieces. You can do it with glass fusing, but it's more common to blow it.
I have a friend in Ventura who has a kiln. He has been doing it for many years. He gave me a gift one time, but I don't remember how big the glass was. She made it, then we went down to some place in South LA where they made a base. So is that's not glass, is that?
That's
glass?
glass blowing. Yeah,
But how big a piece was the glass then? Because I don't remember that part.
yeah. Well,
Is
you
it-
can, if you have a big enough kiln, you can do really big pieces in fusing.
Well, but I mean, to have a base like this, because it's obviously thinner than the glass that was.
Now, you can do a sort of base with particular kinds of slump molds.
Okay, well, we watched them do the base, it was.
Okay,
you know, they
well, yeah,
magic.
yeah, magic, exactly. Well, one of the most exciting things around glass, I think many of you know that Mike, my husband, before we met, he spent a year living and working in Sweden. And so we went to, after we married, we went to Sweden 3 times, I think, and spent time with some of his friends. And one of them lives in the southern part of Sweden in the Glossbruck area, where Kosterboda and Orrefors and all those famous glass places are. But there are lots of small ones too. And we were there in December, so there were no tourists. A friend took us to this small glass place. And there was nobody there except us, and there were a couple of workers there, and one guy was working and blowing things, you know, they were making not art things, but they were making wine glasses or other things. And we could be, I mean, like he was working right here, and all the furnaces were behind him, and we were standing right there. And so he could tell the covetous eagerness in my eyes. And he said, "Oh, would you like to blow something?"
Oh,
And I said, "Well, yes, I would." So he let me come inside, you know, and I put a you know, vest kind of thing on so I wouldn't get burned. And he went into the furnace and he got what they call a gather, the clump of glass at the end of the long tube. And he said, "Okay," you know, and he brought it over and set the tube on something because it's big and it was heavy. And he said, "You know, just gently blow." And so I did, you know, and I made this nice brown ball. It was, of course, you know, not saved, but just to do it was wonderful.
I thought you were gonna say you couldn't blow it because.
No, I
Takes an
blew
enormous
it,
power
I
to
took
blow.
it, you know, it was. I didn't make anything happen first, and then I blew too hard and too much happened, and then I figured out about how you had to blow.
So they had that available at the Corning Glass Museum in Corning, New York, where you sign up when you go into the museum, these various different workshops they have available.
They have, yeah, but they just let you go do it.
No,
No,
they have, no, like Ray Blue.
They have, I went to that,
Yeah.
I've made not a special trip to New York, but
Yeah.
almost a special trip to New York to go to that museum.
Oh, isn't it
It's
fantastic?
wonderful. I spent an entire day there and
Yeah, it's like Disneyland.
I had, at the time I thought about signing up and going back there for classes, but I never did.
Yeah, well, on my second time there, I knew as soon as you walk in, you want to take that one class. and you
Okay.
Do it. sign up then, you know, because they have certain time slots.
Okay, no, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take long to do like it was just a little ornament. to
Right, yeah.
Sign up, you know.
And there's a
You
glass
saved yours?
museum in
Oh,
Tacoma.
yeah, they,
Yes,
no, they
I've been
send
to
it
that
out,
one
they
too.
send it out to you after it cools completely, they get your address and mail it to you.
What I remember is they work so fast. I guess because the glass cools real quickly, they bring it.
Yes, no, and you keep having to put it back in, you know, you do something and then you put it back in and it's that's a really complex process. That makes fusing seem easy. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Sally.
I love all the variety.
Yeah.
Inspiring.
Mhm.
Probably over here.